people, as you saw in that clip, and Larry David, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Christopher Reeve. But really, there's no group of people that is more rewarding to work with than your organization and the people of CASA, because this stimulates my soul, and I'm just flattered to be part of it. And this is the 4th annual Sioux City Light of Hope that I've done. The first, as you've said, that's virtual. And I wish that I could see you. I've made so many friends up there in Sioux City, but this is the way things are right now. But I've been a part of these events now, as you've mentioned, Tim, for several years now, both all over the state. And I see amazing things happen, both in person and, well, now even virtually. Eyes open up, a spark begins, people are moved to action, and they make a profound difference in the lives of our vulnerable children in foster care. Why is it important? Why do we care? Well, just a few months ago, the Kansas City Star did a feature story on foster kids, and what the writer found was startling. It was discouraging, and it was frankly terrifying. This was the headline: "In this country, we're sending more foster kids to prison than to college." That puts a chill down your spine, doesn't it? More kids are being sent, foster kids, to prison than to college. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around it. But folks, we can do better. We have to do better. And we will do better, because these are not throwaway kids. Isa, would you please run that wonderful clip?
Just watching the news and seeing kids being taken out of homes and being neglected and abused, and reading things in the paper about children dying and just being that horribly abused that they were dying, I couldn't just sit back and do nothing about it anymore. So I decided to volunteer with CASA. After I reported what I had seen at the house, the foster parents stopped allowing me access into the home. So, and I tried to make some unannounced visits at different times a day, and nobody ever would open the door. So I started visiting the older child at school and found that she was just being horribly neglected in the home. For a 9-year-old little girl, I think she had just given up that anybody would ever love her or take care of her. And it was so hard for me to see, because she was this beautiful little girl, and you could just see in her eyes that she had just given up. And I remember her teacher saying to me, I don't know what's going on at home, but she won't talk about it, but I know she's just already given up on herself. And you can just tell that she had never had anybody love her. I had to kind of go my own way and take a shirt of hers that she had on at school and bring it back to the CASA office, so that I could show other people that were working on the case and different agencies, this is what she's wearing to school, and this is how she's coming to school. And you know, that's finally how we kind of got through to everybody else. No, this is what this child is living with every day, that she has to wash her own clothing after she wets the bed as punishment, and that she has to sleep in the same bed as her sister and another child that live in the home, and, you know, that she's basically treated like, you know, that she's just worthless and she doesn't matter to anybody. If I can do one thing in this world, it would be to just, at least for one of these children, change their lives or show them a better way, show them that their lives don't have to be like they are now, and that they don't have to be treated like this, and that they don't have to grow up and become like their parents, and they don't have to continue that cycle. And if I can make the difference for one of these kids in their lives, I will feel like I did what I was put on the earth to do.
One day, a young girl was walking along a beach where thousands of starfish had washed up after a terrible storm. When she came to each starfish, she picked it up, threw it back into the ocean. People watched her with amusement. She'd been doing this for some time when a man approached her and said, "Little girl, why are you doing this? Look at this beach. You can't save all these starfish. There are thousands of them. You can't begin to make a difference." The little girl was crushed, deflated. But then she bent down, picked up another starfish, and hurled it as far as she could into the sea. She looked up at the man and said, "Maybe you're right, but at least I made a difference to that one." Ladies and gentlemen, as Tim said, we can't help 6,000 foster kids today, but what we do today might make a difference to one, Maybe that will happen today. You'll notice something next to me here. We're not in person, so there are no donation envelopes in front of you on your table as there have been in the past. But as we go along and as you listen to these stories and the impact that CASA volunteers can have, I encourage you to text LOH. We made it very simple, LOH to 243725 to make a donation. It's so easy. It's so easy to be that light of hope. And we've shortened it to 3 letters, LOH. To 243725. A link will immediately appear on the screen that'll take you to a very convenient donation page. It's so important, and we're so grateful for your generosity. When you exit this morning, a questionnaire will pop up and you'll have a chance to indicate an interest in getting involved in this organization. You can become a CASA volunteer or a business sponsor or bringing friends to an event like this or sitting on the Friends of Iowa CASA board. And I'll go into more of that in just a few minutes. But I want to introduce our first speaker. This is Tom Stock. And I'm going to be honest with you, Tom is one of my favorite people in the world. I was best man at his wedding. Tom was born in Waterloo. His father was in sales, and the family moved so often that by the time he graduated, Tom was always the new kid in school, in fact, about 9 different times. He got into photography at the urging of his parents, who were afraid of his interest in chemistry and electronics. They thought that might lead him to burning down the house. Well, he attended college in Missouri and Florida, graduating with a degree in film and video production. He's worked in broadcasting and advertising, and with me, in fact, in the past, in many roles. Currently serves as the Creative Services Director and Promotions Manager at KCAU TV, right there in Sioux City. He and his wife, Mary, met in high school, band 50 years ago. Between them, they have 4 children and 11 grandchildren. In his spare time, Tom still enjoys photography, and he has yet to burn down the house. Please welcome my dear friend, Tom Stock.
Thank you so much, Gary. I'm here this morning to tell you a story. It's about a young foster parent here in Iowa and a CASA volunteer who changed his life. I'm going to use his words as I tell his story. I'm a foster parent and now an adoptive parent. I want to tell you about our children, Cece and Dexton, and a wonderful person I'll call Cheryl. By 2015, my wife and I had been foster parents for 2 years, and we had taken in 9 temporary foster kids during that time. In early 2015, we took the call about Cece. Right away, her story pulled at my heart. This one was different. Her arm was broken, and she had a full cast from her fingertips to her shoulder. She tested positive for marijuana, and her teeth were so rotten they required 4 crowns and 8 root canals. Her parents did this to her, and she was only 2 years old. This was a terrifying ordeal. I hope the nightmare has faded in Cece's memory over the past 5 years. I hope she doesn't remember the pain of those mistreated teeth. I hope she doesn't remember the pain of that broken arm, an arm so broken it needed surgery and pins so it didn't simply fall apart. An arm so mangled the doctors warned us for months that she might never regain full function of her fingers. Emotional scars heal and physical scars do too. Both, however, are tough to look at. She did regain full function in her arm and hand, and that was an answer to prayers. But to this day, she tells me she wishes nobody could see the scars. 4 days after we met Cece, we got a call about her 5-month-old brother, Dexton. He also had a broken arm and also tested positive for marijuana. I was so angry, just like you're probably angry listening to this, and even more angry because I felt so helpless. These were some of the hardest moments of my life, watching these innocent children struggle with broken limbs and emergency dental work and therapy. I was the one who was caring for these children every day, and it was terribly difficult. I was so stressed, physically and mentally, and I suffered. And it was at this point that something wonderful happened. Cece and Dexton were assigned a CASA, and Cheryl entered our lives. She became their CASA, and she made them a priority. When I first met her, I said, "Please do not leave these kids." She said she wouldn't. She said she would be with them as long as they needed her, and she kept her word. The CASA is all about the kids. The CASA has no agenda other than to be there for the children. This is the person who advocates for their best interests. This is what every single foster child deserves. Cheryl took the time to know everyone involved in their lives. She was there for visits with the biological family. She called and spoke with teachers and doctors. She attended hearings. She watched them grow in our home and became part of our family. And it wasn't easy. Anyone who's been a foster parent knows there are ups and downs. There's not a lot of support for foster parents that way. There aren't a lot of people we can turn to, but I had Cheryl to share my struggles with, and it made all the difference in the world. After 2.5 years, there still wasn't a decision in our case. Cheryl, in her role as CASA, advocated for permanency, and because of her tireless work, the judge ordered that the case move forward. She was there for us at the adoption, as it was finalized and we became a family. She was able to put into words things no one else could to those people who were tasked with making decisions about permanency. I'm so grateful to Cheryl for doing that, and I admire her for volunteering her time and having the strength to advocate for what she knew was right. She's my hero. I think about the first day we met Cece, that terrified and heartbroken and angry little girl with the mangled arm and the rotting teeth and the marijuana in her system. That little girl took to me right away. She clung to me and hasn't left my side since. My words will never be enough to thank Cheryl for her role as a CASA in helping make Cece and Dexton my children. I want to leave you with what Cece said when I asked her what she thought about finally being adopted, having permanency, and knowing that she would be with us forever. She said, "It's my dream come true. I think I was born to be here with this family." Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, for that story. And please send my love to Mary, will you please? Folks, we can make a difference in a child's life. We can change a child's story. Most of those scared, angry, confused children who find themselves in a foster situation will not have a CASA, that adult volunteer looking out for their best interests. Why? Well, there's two reasons. One, there simply aren't enough CASA advocates. And two, there simply isn't enough funding. As of last month, in the counties that make up Northwest Iowa, there are 611 children in need of assistance, and only 244 of them, 244 are served by a CASA. I'm not terrific with math, but I know that's not a good number, and I know we can do better. We are doing better thanks to your ongoing help. This area is so fortunate to have as its coordinator a dynamic woman named Amy Hennies. Forgive me, Amy, for messing up your name. Amy Hennies. I met her and she's absolutely amazing. She's doing phenomenal work, but she needs our help. She needs more volunteers and more funding, and we can help her out. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Al Amar. I met Al last year, I think, at this event. Al grew up in Ree Heights, South Dakota, a town just 60 people in the central part of this. There's only 59 there now, I suppose. Al, you're gone. Right off of State Highway 14. He earned a bachelor's degree from South Dakota State University and an MBA from Ashford University. Al's been a leader in the telecommunications industry for more than 25 years and currently serves as CEO of Fibercom, a full-service telecommunications and broadband provider. Al and his wife, Lisa, have 2 high school children, Catherine and Gannon. Al's been a performing musician for a quarter of a century. And in his spare time, he loves participating in outdoor sports, helping his neighbors, and puttering around his garage. Please welcome Al Amar.
Thank you, Gary. Very, very kind of you for that introduction. I'm here to tell you a Cinderella story today, but not the kind of Cinderella story you think. It's not an underdog sports story. It's not a Disney princess story. There isn't even a fairy godmother. It's about an unfortunate girl who had to be rescued. It took place in Des Moines a little over a year ago, and I'm going to put you in the story. In this story, you're a mom. Life is good. You've got a job you enjoy, a wonderful husband, and 2 great teenage boys. One day, you and one of your sons are in the car, and he suddenly turns to you and he says, "I heard the strangest thing today." "What's that?" you say. "This girl at school," your son says. I saw her after 3rd period." He tells you that he saw a girl sitting under a stairwell. She was sitting on the floor, knees up to her chest, back against the wall. Her arms were clutched tight around her legs, as if she was making herself as small as possible. She was so skinny, your son says, really skinny. Your son isn't the most observant like most teenage boys, but he does remember some details. Her sandy brown hair was messy, her clothes were ratty, and she had suspicious eyes. Your son has a kind heart, so he asks the girl if she's okay. She answers in a voice so soft he can barely hear it. I can't get out. I can't get out. And that was the end of the conversation. The topic of this girl doesn't come up again for a long time. You've moved on to other things, family, job, home. Your life is full and there isn't room for much more. You think about her once in a while, that skinny girl holding her legs to her chest and those suspicious eyes. Until one day, a few weeks later, when your son walks into the kitchen and announces, hey, I talked to that girl again. What girl, you say, although you're pretty sure you know the answer. It turns out your son was outside the school during a fire drill. She was standing next to him. A little flicker in her eyes said that she recognized him. And they stood there, awkward like teenagers tend to be. And then she finally broke the ice. She started telling me stuff, your son said, and I don't know why. What stuff, you asked? And then the story unfolds bit by bit, told in a matter-of-fact way, full of icy images that chill your heart. She's a foster kid, it turns out. She didn't say why she'd been taken from her birth parents, but she'd been in foster home for 3 years, and she was miserable there, frightened, and she thought she would die soon. The words poured out in a rush. She didn't have a bed. She was locked in a bathroom at night and slept on the hard tile. When her family ate meals, she ate expired baby food instead. When she did something wrong, she was forced to run on the treadmill until she collapsed from exhaustion. She did all the cleaning and all of the chores. Her voice never wavered, her eyes never teared up. But hearing your son tell this story, your eyes fill up. It's just like Cinderella, you think. What's the family name, you ask your son in a shaky voice. And he tells you, and two thoughts immediately hit you like a sledgehammer. First, this is slavery. This girl is being treated like a slave. Second, you know the family. You've seen them and you go to church with them. You've even been to their house, you realize now. You were dropping something off. You'd seen her, that mysterious girl taking out the garbage. You noticed the empty look on her gaunt face as she stared at you. And you sit there, the image of that girl locked in your mind's eye, hearing the words over and over again. Foster girl in a foster home, locked in a bathroom at night, sleeping on the tile, eating expired baby food, forced to run on the treadmill as punishment, doing all the household cleaning and all the chores. So what do you do now? You don't know anything about the foster system. You've never heard of CASA program. The only thing you can think of is to call the school counselor. So you do. And thankfully, that's enough. You find out later that the police are called in and she is removed from the home. The parents are arrested. There's some quiet whispering in church about the family, but the matter is soon dropped and you never see the girl again. Now what do you do? Well, if you're the woman in this story, you decide to do something about it. You get on your computer and you research and you talk to people and you find out there's something called the CASA program. You find out, to your astonishment, that there are 6,000 kids across Iowa in foster care, and most of them don't have an adult looking out for them to make sure that your Cinderella story doesn't happen again. You learn that these CASAs are all volunteers, and you learn that it only takes a couple hours a week to be a voice for a girl like that. That woman, the woman that's telling this story, is on her way to becoming a CASA. She doesn't know where that girl ended up, or if she's scarred emotionally or hurt physically. But she also knows that out there, there's another girl just like her. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that story, Al. That story breaks me up, and I know it does you too. You know, a CASA is just a normal person. It's you, it's me. It's a person who says, hey, I got a couple of hours a week to make a difference. It's the goal of this organization to have a CASA advocate for every child who needs one. Now that sounds like a pretty worthy goal, doesn't it? Doesn't that sound like something we can get behind? Can we all agree in this period of disagreement in society that that is a good idea? With your help, it is, and it has to be. We need to flip this narrative, and we can by having more CASA volunteers and supporting them with our pocketbooks. Foster kids are in foster care because something bad has already happened to them. And for all too many of them, the future is just as grim. They're dropping out of school. They're behind bars. They're landing homeless on the streets, and even worse. I'll point out again what you see over my shoulder here. Text LOH to 243725. Couldn't be much easier. It'll make an enormous difference to a vulnerable child. And just as importantly, at the end of the hour, when you log off, you'll have the chance to indicate an interest in other opportunities, becoming a volunteer yourself, or getting your business involved, inviting friends to be part of a Light of Hope event like this. You've heard that a CASA volunteer can be a voice that truly makes a difference. Well, it all started 40 years ago in a courtroom in Seattle. A judge realized that. Isa, would you please roll that clip?
I was faced with a case where a little 3-year-old girl had been brought to Harborview Hospital, and she said the doctor there thought that she probably suffered the injuries from child abuse and called the authorities. And the mother said, no, she fell off the swing, and anyway, my boyfriend's moved out and isn't coming back. And I looked around the courtroom because I had to make a decision at some point about whether to take a 3-year-old child out of the only home she had ever known and put her with strangers, and how would that affect her? And if I returned her home, was she really in danger? And so I looked around the courtroom, and there was really no one there who could only speak up for that child. I thought that maybe we can get volunteers who will represent these kids, train them, and ask them to represent these children in court. So I asked my bailiff to call 6 or 7 people in the community and explain this idea to them, and ask if they wanted to bring a brown bag lunch up to juvenile court and talk about it. When I walked in the lunchroom, there were 50 people there. And I said, this is going to work. And it has. I thought after I retired from the bench that I had gotten all these people into this, and I probably ought to find out what it was all about myself to be a volunteer. It was one of the most satisfying and difficult things I've ever done. They almost self-select. They're the people that really care enough about children to go through the training, and then to know that they're going to spend a lot of time working for that child, and those are the ones that I think we've got right now. Judges need CASA volunteers in their courts, and they really need them to be a party to the action, because there's no one else in that courtroom whose only function in that case is to provide a recommendation that's based on just the child's needs. Everyone else has some other role. No one else in that courtroom can do that except a volunteer.
That's a heroic story. You know, Walt Disney said the way to get started is to stop talking and begin doing. Well, we're almost done talking, but we've got one more powerful story from Lisa Dodge and one more powerful video that you won't be able to turn away from. Then we can really get started. Folks, I hope that what you're seeing and hearing truly touches your heart. In fact, I know it does. I know it makes an impact. I'm inviting you to be our partner. I'm inviting you to join the fight so that no child is without a CASA. And you know what? We can do it. I know I said a few moments ago, we live in contentious times. We can all recognize that. There's a political slant on everything. I get it. But this isn't something that is left or right, red or blue, conservative or liberal. This is about children. This is about our responsibility as adults, all of us. This is about doing everything we can to make sure that children who have already had to endure the most awful circumstances don't have to endure that anymore. Let's talk about how you can help. There are a number of ways. The first option, you've seen this graphic the whole program, there's a critical need for funding. A generous contribution from you will make an enormous difference. The program needs donors and sponsors just like you to do the amazing work it does. We need your help. When you text LOH to 243-725, you get a link that brings you right to a donation page. It's super convenient, super easy. Friends is a 501c3 nonprofit. You may want to make a monthly contribution, which is a great way to do it. Set it up, don't even think about it. Let your generosity help a whole bunch of vulnerable kids. Second, maybe you're ready right now to become a CASA volunteer, or at least you want to hear more about how it works. When you exit this video, there'll be a spot for you to indicate that interest. Check that box. That would mean so much. They would love to have you as part of the team. Third, maybe your company would like to get involved, perhaps as a sponsor for an event like this or in another way. Maybe you want to get your employees interested in becoming CASA volunteers. Maybe you want to adopt this organization as your company's philanthropic focus. Maybe that's you. There's so many ways for a business to become involved. If you think your company might be interested in supporting this cause, just check that box and let us know. Fourth, maybe you're interested in serving on the Friends of Iowa CASA Board of Directors. Tim is looking for talented people in this area to help him further this cause. Just let us know. And fifth, maybe you'd like to invite your friends to be part of this event next year. We would love that. The more, the merrier. Let's spread this message. Check yes, and let's make sure next year, and maybe it'll be in person, is even bigger and better. If for some reason the page where you would like to indicate these interests doesn't appear when you leave the event, Tim will send you an email with the link. He'll probably do it today. I know that guy. He would love to have you involved. Here's what I want this morning. We've mentioned that this Light of Hope is about increase, raise, and inspire. Let's make those three things happen. Increase. Tell somebody what you saw and heard here. We're all sick of social media. We get too many videos of fights and even people's dinner and cat videos. But this is a foolproof issue. It's about health and safety of foster kids. There's nothing controversial about that. We're all for that. Post something about this Light of Hope. And even the grouchy person you're secretly thinking of unfriending won't complain about this. Spread the word. Let's use social media the right way. Check out the Friends of Iowa CASA Facebook page. Like it, comment on it, and share it. Next, raise. Text LOH to 243-725, and let's raise as much money as we can today, this morning, and continue. But let's really focus on that right now. Let's get these CASA volunteers recruited and trained so these abused and neglected children can get the help they need right away. They need us. It's an investment in our children. And third, inspire. We want a bunch of people to sign up to be CASAs today. We need more people in that vital role. You simply will not find anything more satisfying and more rewarding. What an amazing volunteer opportunity this is. And here's all that we're asking: a couple of hours a week to make a life-altering difference. Think about that. We can do it. We can do it together. We've heard what we have to do. We've seen what we need to do. Now is the time to do it. Our third speaker is Lisa Dodge. Today, she's going to tell you a story. Lisa was born in Omaha and then moved around a bit, as you'll find out. She and her partner of 19 years live on a farm in Remsen, Iowa. She works for the Anderson Incorporated in customer support. In her spare time, she likes to read, cook, watch investigative shows, and spends a bunch of her summer enjoying mud races. Please welcome Lisa Dodge.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm going to shock you here right off the bat. When I was 3 years old, I found my mother in a bathtub of bloody water. This isn't a Stephen King novel. It's not a slasher film. It was my life. But in many ways, it was a horror movie. My mom drank a lot. It was mostly beer, then heavier stuff as I got older. There were stretches when she drank or was drunk every day, and I know somewhere deep down she loved us, wanted to get sober, because she was occasionally involved in 12-step programs. I apologize. But she battled these demons, and she battled her emotions, and one day it was too much for her. She tried to commit suicide by climbing into the tub and slitting her wrists. My sister Michelle and I knocked on all the doors of the neighboring apartments to tell them that mommy was bleeding and asking for help. I don't remember crying or screaming. We were both pretty calm. Neither of us were really a stranger to abuse. It was just another day on our calendar. My mom made it out alive that day, barely, but an alcoholic mother who tries to commit suicide in front of her 2 infant children will quickly get the attention of social services. And 2 workers did soon knock on our door. They told my mom that if she didn't stop using, they would remove her children. And my mom defiantly told them that she would never give up drinking. Let me pause for a second to let that sink in. My mom was given the choice between her children and her booze, and she chose the booze. The social workers promptly put us in the back seat of their car and took us away. I remember burning my finger on a lighter that I found in the floor of their car. It's kind of amazing the strange things you can remember so vividly when you're so young. I think trauma has a powerful way of making that happen. Michelle and I were taken to a foster home to live with Cliff and Corrine. They were originally from Boston, and I love to hear them pronounce words like ka and pak. They were good foster parents. Cliff was quiet, smoked a pipe. He reminded me of a dear old grandfather. Corrine was strict but kind and pretty much ran the house. Meanwhile, Mommy was trying to get better from being sick. She would sometimes have visits with us. I loved those. I was so excited to see her. Sometimes I would go by myself, and sometimes my sister would go by herself. I knew the 3 of us would be together again soon, until the day it didn't happen. That day I was told that I was going to go back home to Mommy, but my sister was going to go live somewhere else. I really think that moment was the beginning of my lifelong issues with insecurities that I have plagued me since. I've learned to recognize it and deal with it and not let it control me, but it's there nonetheless. See, my sister was my safety net. She was protective of me, and honestly, I felt that as long as I wasn't alone, I could make it. And then all of that was gone. My mom chose to give away my sister, and she was put up for adoption. It wasn't a happy ending for Michelle, unfortunately. She was put into the system, adopted, unadopted, then readopted by a different family. My mom had taught her early how to shoplift for food, clothes, and things like that. You get started down that road and it's tough to get off. She's been in and out of prison her whole life. You either acquire the skills to overcome your upbringing and choose to do so, or you don't. I thought I would always be close to my sister, but we have no relationship at all anymore. That makes me pretty sad. So my mom and I lived together, and I was immersed in the seedy world of drugs and alcohol. I learned the tricks of the trade, how to roll a joint, how to cut cocaine to make crack and crank, and how to put nitroglycerin pills under somebody's tongue when they were overdosing. Normal things every kid should learn, right? When I was 11, my mom's substance abuse finally won. She abandoned me, leaving me with an ex-boyfriend of hers and moving to California. So I went through more foster homes. The best was a temporary foster home. I was there 2 weeks. They were a very Christian home, and I felt safe because they made me feel like a part of their family. The worst home, my goodness, it had bugs, mice, rats in the house. I ran the streets with their 15-year-old daughter. They had another foster boy there who had scoliosis and was severely taken advantage of. He was picked on horribly by the neighbor kids. The dad had cancer, stayed in his room with the door closed, and smoked all day and night. The mom had mental issues and was not very clean. She worked nights as a nurse. She also slept on the couch and urinated and had her period on the couch, and then made the foster boy clean up after her. It was all so disgusting and heartbreaking. I was eventually adopted shortly before I turned 12. Now my life is my own, and I'm doing good things with it. But I wish something, and I wish it with all my heart. I wish I had had a CASA all to myself. Someone being with me through the entire process, looking out for my best interest, who would have made a huge impact. It's a scary, lonely time for a child like me. Having somebody by my side would have given me peace and comfort and hope. And now I am a CASA myself. I didn't set out to be a CASA, but I have received so very many blessings in my life. And this is truly a very easy way for me to give back. I've been there. I know what they're going through, and these children need to know there is somebody in their corner. I know I have a lot to give. Thank you.
Lisa, you anchored this broadcast this morning with your courage to tell that story. Thank you. That's here. This is Northwest Iowa. This is next door. Next door. What you're going to see in this last video took place in California, but it could have been Sioux City just as easily, or Cherokee or Storm Lake. You're not going to turn away. Take a look.
My father was a very scary man. I'm not lying when I tell you that I literally saw the devil in his eyes. My mom was a stay-at-home wife, my dad was a doctor, an educated man in a respective individual on the streets. You know, behind closed doors, my father was a different man. My father was an abusive person. He enjoyed seeing people in pain. My father would hit us on a daily basis. I have 57 scars on my body. The last scar my dad did to me was almost 2 months after my 9th birthday. My mom was at the floor, and my father was hitting her on the lower back, and she was no longer making a sound. She was no longer moving. And I just remember getting into the middle of it and just asking him to stop. I never been more scared of anyone in my life. He grabbed me by the neck, took me down to the kitchen, literally. I mean, 9-year-old kid. He grabbed the knife and he tried to cut my eye out. My mom, she could no longer walk. My mom couldn't parent us. At age 16, you know, I was fed up with life. On July 27, 2006, I was taken in by the police. I tried to commit suicide. I was taken into a mental hospital. This guy came in and told me I was going into foster care. He told me it was going to be a family who was going to take care of me. Going to all these foster homes. In between foster homes, I went back to a group home and then went back to a different group home and came back to the same group home. So if I had to count how many times I moved, I would say anything in between 10 and 13 times. It was 2 days before my 18th birthday. All of a sudden, the secretary of the group home comes in and tells me, hey, your CASA is here. I didn't understand. I didn't know what a CASA was. And I see this guy, it's like around 3:30, 4 p.m. in the afternoon on that Friday. And these guys, they were in a 3-piece suit. It's hot outside. I feel like this guy was old and boring. We would never have nothing in common. And we started talking. Just conversation about us. He genuinely wanted to know about me. And then I asked him one very important question. What kind of music do you listen to? And he answered me, salsa, merengue, bachata, reggaeton, and I'm like, you're too old to listen to that. Music for me was very important. That was the first moment where someone said that they liked music as much as I did. He told me he was gonna come back. My idea was, okay, this guy may come back one more time, but he's gonna be just like everybody else, here today, gone tomorrow. 2 days later, on my birthday, he said, like, let me take you out. And I guess, you know, I mean, he took me to a restaurant where, you know, there was a waitress, and then we sit down. There's 2 forks, there's 2 knives, there's a spoon. And I'm like, what is this for? He can see me, like I'm literally sweating as I am sitting in front of him. And he asked me, have you ever used those? And the group only gave us pork. We laughed about it. And I think of this very moment often. I have never been with someone who would actually took the time to explain something to me. Something so simple as using a fork. Marco, he told me his official title, Court-Appointed Special Advocate, a CASA. I told him, we laughed a little bit about CASA being also a home in Spanish. To me, he being a CASA makes sense because for me at home, it's where a parent or someone who cares for you is at. And Marco truly cared about me. I got my CASA on June 20th, 2008. And this guy, within a week, he was already calling everyone and their grandmother on my case, trying to find out what was happening in my life. Call my social worker, call my case manager, call my therapist, call my attorney, call everyone. Marco pieced me back together. My CASA was the first person who worried about my future and my education. I opted in for a GED. I started my program in July, and I finished in December. I passed it with an A. Just because this man came into my life and sparked a light in me. My CASA told me something very simple. It's like, don't let your life, what happened in your past, define who you are. You know, and no one ever said that to me. By statistic, I'm supposed to become homeless within a year of being 18 out of foster care. And I am now 26 years old. I have my own car, I have my own place, never been to jail, I got an education, I have a really good job. My CASA taught me to be strong, to not let my past define me, and believe in me, and still with me. And to today, my CASA, he's the longest stable, positive relationship I have in my life. This man, a total stranger. A regular person with a regular job, an extraordinary heart, with an extraordinary skills to set someone free. That is my CASA.
Wow. Folks, you've heard real stories of child abuse, and there are just too many of them, and there just aren't enough CASAs. There's a child out there who doesn't feel loved right now. There's a child who's lonely. There's a child right there, right in your community, who doesn't know where to turn. There's a child who desperately needs your help. Thank you so much for being here this morning, and thank you all for being a part of the Light of Hope. Have a great day.